So let's talk about the race. Why is Western States so sought after in the ultra running world? Why were 6,600 people in the lottery for 369 spots last year?
You know, I think it's just been kind of matured over time, much like, you know, I was kind of looking at it as the Boston Marathon of our same sport, right? It was kind of the first one. It had kind of this prestige point to point. It's always kind of a more interesting course dynamic than going around in circles or, you know, whatever the other thing might be. I think part of it is that, you know, when it first came out, it kind of had a dramatic setting, you know, from Squaw Valley, the place of the 1960 Olympics, and up and over the Sierra, and down through. And the other thing I think it does is unlike a lot of the other events, is there's kind of almost like at least 3 different parts of the race, right? You have kind of this high alpine stuff when you're in the Squaw Valley area. You get down into the river drainage, it's a completely different thing than you were up in that. You know, at the high part, you got snow, you got altitude. You know, the trailhead isn't as well maintained because it's probably been under snow for, you know, 6 months, 9 months. You get into the canyons, you're talking about really steep ups and downs. You know, people are burning out their legs going downhill as much as they are going uphill. And we think, oh, you know, the uphills are hard. Yeah, but most people get their quads thrashed by going the downhill. And this is such a great downhill course that a lot of people just fry themselves. And then at the end, you got kind of that, you know, kind of foothill, oak tree, you know, grassland effect that I think you really almost have, you know, the course continues to change as you go down it. And so it's not just, you know, high altitude, or it's not just, you know, whatever these other courses have. It has a little bit of a dynamic thing. And the one thing that I've always thought was great about Western States is it has difficult parts where most, you know, normal people have to walk on, like, you know, the Jim Kings and the Jim Walmsleys. If your name is Jim, Howard, King, Walmsley, you probably don't have to walk, but most of the rest of us average humans have to. But it's a course where there's some great running, you know, just bomber downhill, single track. You know, if you're feeling good, you can be running 6-minute pace and just going crazy. And I think some of the other events continue to try to get more complicated, more hard, right? It's like, well, let's see how hard, let's make everybody go straight up and down for, you know, 40 hours or something. Well, there's not a whole lot of really great running in a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But this one, you know, you have to be able to run hard at mile 80 and 90 when, you know, you're really good terrain, whether it's, you know, over there at Auburn Lake Trails or going down California Street. If you're not running 2:15 now down California Street, you're probably not in the, you know, going to be anywhere near the front, right? Yeah. You know, and when I was doing it, it was more like 2:25 or 2:30 was a great time. But now, you know, all those guys at the front are just hauling down there at amazing rates. And I think that makes it more of an exciting event, particularly if people are close. As these guys are still running and pushing hard. You're just looking at, God, that guy's at mile 78, and he's still clicking off the miles at some alarming rate. That it makes it a little more exciting that way.
I thought that both the ride and the run were written into federal legislation to be allowed to use Granite Chief Wilderness, or the section of trail in Granite Chief Wilderness, from 4.5 to, well, now it's 10 miles, it was 7.5. And I've learned that that is not the case. We have a letter from the Chief Associate Justice that allows us to use that. We're not sure if that would actually hold up if it was put up to public.
That's why we probably don't want to tell them there's no official document. Everybody thinks it's still there, so let's just roll with that.
So, you know, that's definitely a vulnerability that I didn't take serious, mm-hmm. And it really is serious.
Yeah, it's you know, again, that's what I think that's the biggest threat to the event that we have, is if they shut that down. Again, there's other options we could probably figure out. You know, we could, I don't know, you know, you could start maybe other places and get onto the course. I mean, look at what you've done with Pahatsi, right? That's a way of getting onto the course at Red Star. You just take another very different route in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think when people look at the event and what goes on. By the time the event is on and we run from Squaw Valley to Homer, it looks really clean, and, you know, everybody knows what they're doing, and it's kind of a bit like a space launch, right? Once the thing's in the air, you know, you're not going to say that it's either you did all the preparation and it's all right, or is how much work goes on in the background for, you know, working with the Forest Service, working on those land issues, working on access issues. That's another big thing is, you know, are we going to be able to keep gaining access to dirt roads and locations where the aid stations are? Because I don't know how many aid stations are at the end of either private roads or dirt roads, or somebody changes hands. I mean, look at like Cal 2. That piece of land changed hands, and it's great. It almost was an improvement for us. from the person that owned it previously. It's like, well, a new person there, they love the event. We try to take good care of them, they take good care of us. But, you know, if that guy decides to move and change his hands and somebody buys it and they don't like the run or the ride or anything else, now all of a sudden we're negotiating with someone that we don't have access to that aid station. And again, we'd be scrambling to do other things, and we know of other routes in and out of there, but you know, it's that's always a
I think the private land in the state area, we can perfect prescriptive easements for the trail, but the aid station access, I don't think we could perfect an easement saying, oh, we've been able to access these aid stations.
Yeah, and I think those are whether we're driving through private land or it's on private land. You know, I don't know exactly where some of those boundaries are, but we've been lucky so far. I mean, it's good. I mean, well, now we're kind of in and out the top part of Bass Street a little bit. We've kind of seen what can happen.
Yeah. So the aid station access is definitely a precarious situation.
Yeah, that's. Well, I mean, you look at it. It's kind of funny when you look at the event. You know, back in the '80s, there were quite a few less aid stations, right? You almost had to go to Red Star Ridge at the beginning before you had your first real aid station. You know, you could do the old natural aid station, you know, fill up your water bottle in the Willow Grove and all that. But, you know, there was no aid station at El Dorado Bridge, which makes the stretch from Devil's Lake to, you know, Michigan Bluff quite long without any formal aid. Again, you could still go into the creek or get water out of the stream or whatever you wanted to do. But, you know, the race is kind of, the pendulum swung from not too many aid stations to probably more aid stations than we needed, and now it's kind of settled back at probably the right level. I just remember, you know, speaking of Doug Latimer, you know, it was him or somebody says, well, the idea of the run isn't to run from picnic basket to picnic basket. You're supposed to be out there taking care of yourself and planning ahead. So if you do have a long stretch, you better know that and take all the required nutriments along the way. And if you don't, then that's part of the event. You know, the course and the event, you know, caught you a little bit there. So that's always been kind of one of the fun parts of the event, is being able to, you know, get yourself from aid station to aid station before you run out of energy or water or whatever else you need.
Anything else you want to talk about the trail before we start talking about the race and your involvement in the race?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think the one thing that, you know, when you think of it over the years, when you think of the relationships we've had, even though we've had some pretty big events, whether it be fires or, you know, getting the course back open again, you know, I think when you look at the relationships that we've built with the Forest Service and state parks, and even some of the other places that we contact outside of that, like some of the private landowners in Squaw Valley and these other places we have to do it, I think the relationship's as strong as, if not the strongest it's ever been, because of the amount of kind of handshaking going back and forth there. We want to help those guys. You know, they don't have sometimes all the money and all the resources to get stuff done, but we can bring to bear some assets that way. In the same way, we can't put the event on without having state parks and, you know, Tahoe National Forest being on our side. But, you know, we've been through multiple district rangers, we've been through multiple supervisors at the state level, and it seems like each time we get a new one, you know, I think that the people that work on the race with those guys are top-notch people, and that's why we had those relationships kind of mature and get stronger over the years. And then in like '85, they added other mileage, you know, and they started adding the higher part of Auburn Lake trails rather than going down along the river, down through Ball Bearing Hill and then on Quarry Road, and then added some more mileage in town. And then the next year was the year they added even a little bit more mileage to get, you know, the California Street was what really took it a little over 100 miles, right? 100.2, something like that. But no, I wasn't involved in the decision making there yet. But yeah, that was a pretty big jump as far as difficulty and times wise, for sure. That I'd have to go back and look at my times, but I think even though you did the same thing, I was running better, but I was a little like an hour slower on the new course. Yeah,
so I was just talking to Al Hall. We're dealing with the issue on Cal 2 right now with the private land, and he was explaining how the elevator shaft came to be, which is the really steep section. He said that the brothers that were making the trail didn't line up. They didn't have GPS, and so they're like, oh, one's high and one's low, so they just went straight.
Yeah, what's the easiest way to fix this?
It wasn't engineered. So
what's funny about that, when you look at it, you go, yeah, that would make perfect sense, right? It's what, I don't know, 150 yards or something, 100 yards straight up and down. Then you look at it and you go, why didn't they just go and put a switchback in there? Because that's what we're going to try to do, right? We're going to try to take that piece out. Even though it's exciting, it's a little dangerous. hazardous for the runners for sure. And certainly the horses don't fare very well in that either because it's so slippery. But that sound, that was kind of one of those old Wendell stories too. Like, did anybody give him permission, or did he say, is it okay or not? They just all started plowing, and then when it was all done, that worked out pretty good. Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, I heard a couple stories from Hal. He wasn't allowed to build the trail in one of the places that he tried because the woman came out after he'd knocked down her fence and bulldozed her pond. So, what the heck are you doing?
A little too close to civilization.
So he stopped. Yeah.
And then we had a pretty, I don't say boring year. The next year, I think Hal won in 2007.
Yeah.
And then 2008, literally the week before, we're up at Robinson Flat doing trail work, having our normal camp out, and we drive back through Forest Hill, and then you're like, hey, that looks like a fire going over there, and you hadn't seen anything. It looked like just a little, somebody had a control burn that was a little bit bigger than they wanted, and then later on that night and into Sunday, we realized, hey, there's some fires, and there were some pretty big growing fires, and then we literally just. It's different like this year with the pandemic. You had all this lead up time to kind of assess all the stuff and weeks, months going on. That one we had like a day or two to decide, do we want to still try to put this race on, or do we need to shut it down as quickly as we can? Because we got people coming from all over the world for this event. We don't want them to, wait until Saturday morning at 4:30 and go, yeah, sorry guys, we're not going to do this while everybody's, chomping at the bit at Squaw Valley. And so, we had, 2 or 3 different meetings, every night we'd meet, we talked to the Forest Service. And it kind of, again, it's one of those where you really step away from the event and go, let's put our common sense hats on here. Do you really need, thousands of people up on this fairly remote road when you've got 2 fires going, when you've got, emergency vehicles, and, fire guys and helicopters and, probably, emergency vehicles like ambulances and attended to those guys. You just don't really need anything like that. Luckily, we probably canceled it as quickly as we could. I think we were like Tuesday and the race was on Saturday, but the fire really didn't get going until Sunday. So we really had 2 days. And at the end of the day, we absolutely made the right choice because we know that 3 weeks even after our event, the horse ride got canceled from the same fires. So, it was a pretty long, drawn-out suppression there. But I can still remember going to Squaw that, and we kind of tried to make, lemonade out of lemons because we knew we were putting a race on. But we had a dinner that night on Friday night and had everybody, we served like burritos and tacos and stuff, and everybody had a chance to sit there and relax. But I just remember looking up over the passage and seeing the smoke billowing over the top of the pass, going, oh yeah, that's a good thing we canceled this because there was no way we could ever put a race on that Saturday.
So my understanding, Forest Service didn't make you shut down, cancel the race. You made the decision.
Yeah, we made the decision ourselves, and that was really. I don't think they wanted to tell us no, you can't do it. I think they realized that we would be able to come to that decision on our own, and it was pretty. When, like I say, when the time you really sit back and go, what's the chances that we could put an event on? It looked so tiny, like you're asking for a miracle. That just like, hey, they say a bet here, just call it off, and just roll everybody over. So but that's not. I remember Greg Sullivan was the race director then. He goes, and his comment was, well, we were really good at putting on a race, but canceling and unwinding a race that we're not putting on, that's way harder. We've done that other part like year after year after year, but when you sit there and go, okay, what does it take to cancel an event? Notify all the runners, notify all the agencies, all the aid station people. I mean, it's a long, drawn-out process to not put on an event when it's 3-4 days before your launch. So it was we've had to do that again. So I mean, we had a lot of really good learnings from that for sure.
It's fun. Well, your whole career's been something I've admired for many years. Much appreciated. I know you do a lot of stuff that people have no idea that you do. Some of the things you do are visible, but your contributions to the sport, to the race, have been just incredible for so many years. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, but it's been a great event, and it's been a great